Welcome to the third presentation in this video series, Rejuvenation Process Electrical. So let us quickly recap here. As we have done in the past, we're dealing with the human system and we've broken it up into four main areas of energy management. The first area, the physical, we addressed in the first couple of videos. In the second set of videos, or three subsequent videos, we addressed the biochemical level. And in this section, we're actually going to address the electrical in just one video. So it's going to be a little bit longer. We're certainly going to go into a few technical terms, but by the time we've moved through this knowledge, you'll understand how the electrical energy moves through your system and why it's so important to have each area effectively functioning. I'll also let you know how you can gain a higher level of self-control in this regard, which is, as we'll come to see, essential when it relates to health and the function of the body and mind. So let us look here at the components that we're dealing with. Of course, one being the nervous system itself, and that includes all of the nerves which are like wires moving into the body that carry the electricity. Of course, including the brain, which is the initiating point of the electrical energy moving through the system. And what is initiating it significantly is your perception. The perception, as we'll come to understand, is different between different people. It's not a universally consistent thing. For example, to utilize the analogy in the previous presentation of the dog barking, there will be some people that will walk past a dog barking and they will get an enormous fright. They will sense that there is great danger. The heart will jump up into the throat, as it were, and they'll get those various physiological responses that we talked about in the last video, all occurring: increased heart rate, increased breathing, increased blood pressure, and so forth. You could find another person that would walk past the exact same dog, and yet they will calmly walk past it, acknowledge that it's barking, but have no intrinsic sense of danger. So of course their system won't respond in that fight or flight response. That's very different. So as we'll come to see here, your perception is really the central component that is going to determine how your nervous system operates on a subconscious level. More specifically, the autonomic nervous system sounds a lot like automatic, doesn't it? We're going to get into this today. You'll learn how to direct that energy more effectively by cultivating this knowledge. So first up, let's take a look at the nervous system itself and what actually comprises it. So the nervous system is comprised of the brain, highlighted in the blue to the side there, the spinal cord, which descends out of the brain and carries the electrical energy from your brain to the rest of the body, and then the peripheral nerves, which exit the spinal cord and thereby reach all other different tissues, etc. within the system. So it is critically important that the nerves stimulate each area of the body. If they don't, the tissue will cease to function and atrophy. So in our last presentation, we referred to the importance of having the cardiovascular system and the nutrients that it is carrying reaching these cells to ensure that they have what they need, the building blocks and energy, to do their job. It's also the case that each cell needs to receive a supply or a connection to the nervous system to receive instructions from the brain. These two components, the nervous system or the electrical energy that moves through it, and the vascular system or the nutrients and energy that moves within your blood vessels, this is generally referred to as your physiology. So for example, a lot of people sit down during the day for their jobs. In fact, we grow up through an educational system that we are put into high chairs immediately as a baby, aren't we, for a start? And then once we get to school, we are once again sitting down. We move through this in high school and then even move into the workforce. Many of us are still sitting down. Now the issue with this, as you would perhaps like to participate here with me to distinctively discern, is that the muscles down the middle of the back switch off. These are referred to as the thoracic extensors. So just try this with me right now. If you were to imagine that there is a string connected to the top of your chest and it's pulling you directly up toward the ceiling, what would happen to your body? Try that right now. Alright, so that act of elevating the chest directly vertically is a cue to activate those muscles, the thoracic extensors, that connect to the vertebral pieces that have ribs coming off them. They change the position of the rib cage and thereby influence the way that muscles are functioning further down the body, including the core muscles, the position of the pelvis, and subsequently the legs. So if these muscles atrophy, weakness of the mid-back or thoracic extensors results in the low back doing all of the work and subsequently becoming very tight. So as you can imagine, as you now let go of that elevation of the chest toward the ceiling, just drop your chest down and completely relax your body. Allow it to slouch. You'll probably automatically find, because you're likely seated whilst you're watching this, that your elbows are resting on your thighs. That gives some degree of support, but note there's no longer any tension in your spine. The thoracic extensors have shut off, your chest dropped toward your pelvis. Now there's no pressure in the midsection as well. Now that might be okay whilst you're sitting down for a brief period, but if you continue to remain in that position over a long duration, you'll find that your body will stiffen into that position. Then, over time, as you go to stand back up, well, something has to elevate your body to become erect against gravity there. And if the mid-back or thoracic extensors are not doing their job, the low back is that which has to take the tension. All right? So if the low back's doing all the work, it's going to become tighter and tighter and tighter. And this is one of the biggest problems that we have with dysfunction within the body. Needless to say, too much tension in the low back is going to lead to injury, but it's actually a lot worse than just an acute episode, as we'll go into. If you have a lot of tension in your low back, one of the things that it's going to do is shut off the nerves from reaching the various areas of your body. And this is going to create a blockage in the ability for your body to deliver electrical energy to the tissues so that they can get instructions of specifically what to do. So likened to the cardiovascular system delivering energy and nutrients, the cells will dissolve and break down. If they don't get the electrical current, they simply won't know what to do. They'll go into dysfunction. And so this can impair not only the function of your muscles, but also your organs. If you look at the picture on the side here, you'll see here is the central nervous system, including the brain and spinal cord. All right, and you can see that from the spinal cord, all of these nerves come off the spine, don't they? They reach the various areas of the body. What you can also see is that from the nerves, they also extend into the various organs of the body. And so you could see that if there was, for example, a blockage in one of these vertebral pieces here, this is the lower section of the thoracic spine, you can see how this is connected through here, this junction, to various different organs. Here's the liver, here's the pancreas, the spleen, the stomach, the kidney here, and even the intestines, which we talked about in the last section relating to the biochemistry. So impaired organ function results in reduced systemic function, thereby illness, lethargy, weight gain, suffering, and disease. It can be the cause of the issue, the nervous system being blocked from the organs as it prevents them from doing their job. Because all peripheral nerves exit the spine, it is important that the spine is mobile, flexible, and not compressed. So just think about that for a moment, a point of self-reflection. Does your spine feel like it's flexible and pliable? Can you bend to the side easily without pain? Can you extend yourself, lifting your chest up high, bend yourself forward? Can you rotate, twist to one side and then the other? Are you able to go through these ranges of motion without feeling stiff, without feeling discomfort or pain? It should feel light as a feather if it's functioning really well. Alright, so because all peripheral nerves exit the spine, it's important that the spine is mobile, flexible, and not compressed. So the point of compression here, if we look at this picture on the side, and we've looked at this in the physical presentation too, here is an example of what happens if the nerves are compressed. This is a classic sciatica. This is one of the nerves exiting the spine in the low back. Alright, here's the lumbar spine, and you can see the nerves come down the leg here. If you have compression, then you get the discs being squashed, which can impinge upon the nerves. In other words, it's like pinching the wires and inhibiting the electricity from moving along there properly. Now, because the effective flow of electricity through the nerves results in the feeling of comfort within the body, if you have the opposite, a restriction of the capacity for electricity to move through your nerves, that's referred to as pain. So that's why you get this symbolic image on the side here with red, where's my little mouse thingy gone, indicating pain, isn't it? Moreover, if there is impairment of the nerve coming all the way down the leg, this specifically the sciatic nerve, you can impair the function of the muscles down here as well. You can actually get not only pain, but a dysfunction in the way that the muscles operate. So an effective question to ask is, what creates the spinal compression? Now, there are many different ways or means through which you can generate this compression or inflammation effect within the system. The first of which we really went into in the first presentation, didn't we, in relation to the physical, poor posture and inactivity. As we've just discerned, if you sit and slouch in a chair, you'll develop that what's called a kyphotic position, where the chest slouches toward the pelvis. And that is the beginning of the shutting off of the nervous system. That is the beginning of the compression of the spine, particularly the low back. As a result of this, as we've noted, you'll get dysfunction to a degree within the organ system and muscular systems as well. So another thing that contributes to this is misinformed exercise choices. And on the side here, you'll see I've indicated a deadlift to sort of symbolize this. And I'm going to get, eggs thrown at me from the fitness industry for pointing this out, because it's probably not going to be very well received. The deadlift is one of the power lifts, one of the main three lifts that people utilize. The other two being squats and bench press, particularly guys, to generate strength and power within the system. But the issue I have with this as a wellness practitioner, not only a strength and conditioning practitioner, but a wellness practitioner, is that when you have such a lifting technique, regardless of how well you're doing it, you have to ask yourself in your daily life, how often do you pick up 40, 50, 60, 80 or 100 kilos off the ground? It's a very rare occasion that you'd ever need to lift up something more than 20 kilos or 10 for most, isn't it? And so the issue with this is that if you're practicing a lift like this, where you're lifting a lot of weight off the ground many times a week, the body's going to respond to that. It's going to respond by increasing the protein density in the muscles involved, significantly including the low back. As a result of that, it's going to compress the spine, reduce the output of the nervous system, and you could get some organ dysfunction and muscular dysfunction. Of course, pain and reduced innervation is the very common symptom that arises, perhaps later in life. It's a lesson long learned. There is also diet-related organ inflammation. This is another elusive component that we did talk about to a degree in the biochemical element, where if you put food into your system, it goes down into your belly. If it's in disagreement with the belly and how it functions, if it blocks up your system, then your system's going to become frustrated, isn't it? It can't do its job. It's going to take its hat, throw it on the ground. I'm not going to do anything then. All right. So this can cause a lot of problems, because inflammation within the intra-abdominal space, that is to say the belly, can then spread into the area of the low back as well, compressing the spinal nerves and thereby causing pain and dysfunction as well. We've also got stress-related muscular tension, which we will briefly look at when we move into our section on the cranial nerves, another primary component of the nervous system. And stubborn, conflicting beliefs. So this is an example of where your perception significantly comes into this. You see, if you are someone that has a personality that is reasonably accommodating, patient, considerate, and so forth, what you'll find is that you'll probably fit in with the rest of the population more effectively than someone that has very rigid beliefs. Things have to happen a certain way. If it doesn't happen the way they want it to happen, then they're going to get upset. They have controlling tendencies. Perhaps they're a bit of a perfectionist. If you have these sorts of characteristics which are associated with your belief system, this is more likely to create tension within the body, because you are perceiving the environment in terms of stress. Something's not happening the way it should be happening in terms of your belief. And this is, of course, happening all the time, day in, day out, because the environment is intrinsically outside our control, isn't it? So here I'm just giving a little elaboration. We're not going into extensively go into the psychology of this in this presentation, perhaps a future talk, but just to give you an idea of how your physiology is responding to your mind, which is, of course, driven by your perception, isn't it? Now, emotional trauma is also another thing that can create this sort of issue of spinal compression, and another one that's a little elusive. But what you'll find is that there are deep limbic connections to the belly, for example. The vagus nerve is intricately connected to the belly, and thereby the nerves in the belly. And so what you'll find is that when you are moving through emotional trauma, that's a stress upon the system. There is a corresponding impact upon the organ system, but particularly the belly. You will have heard someone say, for example, I've just got this gut feeling about this. It's giving you an indication on a common level that there is a connection between the midbrain, the limbic system, and the belly, and thereby the nervous system and the surrounding musculature as well can be affected. It's all interconnected. It's all related to our mind, our perception, and our body. Because the truth is, it's not a body and a mind. It's referred to as a body-mind, or a mind-body these days. We're recognizing that it is really one and the same, the body being the physical extension of the non-physical perception that becomes our mind. Now, another, as we move further out the scale here into ambiguity, element is energetic blockages, and this refers to the subtle energy body or the electromagnetic level. We'll be going into that in more extensive detail in the next presentation. So let us take a look then next at these specific components, and you'll note that perception and the brain are interrelated, aren't they? In other words, the neurochemistry moving through the brain can affect your perception. For example, if you're quite hormonal one day, that's going to cause your perception to change, isn't it? You might feel a little more irritated, a little less patient with the people around you. And of course, if you take conscious attention and notice that you're irritable, then you can say, okay, I'm just going to take a breath here, slow down my system, calm that irritation within me, and thereby take control over my mood. So this, of course, is indicating that there are techniques that we can utilize to influence the biochemistry, the neurochemistry, our mood and how we feel, if we have those skills and if we have the insight to perceive it before it gets out of control and we're into this emotional roller coaster where we then look back at a later point in time and think, wow, I was really out of control there. Okay, that's an example of how the body becomes in control, the chemistry takes over. Alcohol is another great example of how that might happen. And how important it is to actually have the mind or the higher faculty of awareness in control of the body. You're going to make more sensible choices if that's the case. So let's look here at the brain a little more extensively, as in addition to the spinal cord and peripheral nerves, the brain has 12 pairs of nerves, and these are referred to as the cranial nerves. So you could look at this as additional electrical wires descending from the brain that aren't actually requiring the spinal cord to deliver that electricity. They're like independent contractors, right? So these nerves are involved with sensory perception, facial and head movement, and we're not going to go really extensively into this, but you can kind of see here from the picture, okay, these 4 nerves, including the optic, the oculomotor, trochlea, they obviously have to do with the eye, how the eye is moving, how it is operating. You've got the olfactory nerve, has to do with the smell. You've got the trigeminal nerve. You can see that has to do with the facial muscles and areas of the brain, of the face rather, and head. And you've got other areas having to do with taste. Here's the accessory nerve associated with the muscles of the neck, hence the connection between stress, tension in the neck, and perception. Here is the infamous vagus nerve beside it, and the misbehaving mouse. Here we go. Right here you can see how it connects into the various organs of the digestive and respiratory system, and thereby can influence how your organs are operating. Here's the vestibular cochlea. This is associated with the hearing and your inner ear, and again the facial expression here on cranial nerve number 12. All right, so these are, as I say, independent contractors. They respond really specifically to your perception. You'll notice that as someone is responding to the environment, they have various facial changes, don't they? And it's almost like your facial expression is symbolizing or showing you how the person is feeling and thinking. Obviously, someone's got bright, sunny eyes, a big smile. Okay, they're feeling happy. So if someone's got a frown going on, well, we know pretty much what they're likely to be thinking, don't we? And likewise, we have frustration, curiosity, confusion. We have different facial positions or expressions to convey how we are feeling, don't we? You can see once again here as we make this observation how intimately connected our perception, our mind, and our body really are. So particularly the vagus nerve also regulates the autonomic nervous system, which we are going to go and take a look at next. So the autonomic nervous system is like the automatic system. It regulates your system automatically. In other words, you don't have to think about it. It's just going to respond, even on a subconscious level, to the environment. So this, of course, is important for your safety and survival, because you might not consciously recognize that there is something dangerous, but your system might pick it up and you might start feeling uneasy. We it's kind of alluded to this with the dog barking, but this also happens in a more subtle way, doesn't it? Say someone enters the room or perhaps hops on the bus, and you take a look at them and you just start feeling a little uneasy. I don't know if I can trust this guy. There are, of course, instances where you have a person that's neurotically anxious, which is perhaps going into a more delusive idea of what the danger is, always worrying. But there's also the case that you can kind of use your spidey sense or your sixth sense and pick up, is this environment safe? This is an example of your autonomic nervous system giving you some feedback. So to maintain a regenerative state, it is critical that your parasympathetic nervous system, that is the division that is calming and cultivating, can switch on when needed. And this is how it relates specifically to our intention here, to understand the processes of regeneration and rejuvenation. You see, when it comes to nighttime, and as we discussed in the last video, when the light goes away in the environment, you have changes physiologically. The pineal gland begins to secrete that melatonin in your body, starts to move into the sleep cycle. Consistent with that change, which is in response to your perception, isn't it? The parasympathetic nervous system begins to take over, And during the night, of course, you have these regenerative processes that take place. As a result of that, you wake up the next day and you do your big yawn and come out to the mirror, and you notice that whereas your face might have looked gaunt and dull the previous evening, exhausted, perhaps the wrinkles are more exaggerated, in the morning after a great sleep, actually you literally have rejuvenated, haven't you? The wrinkles seem less, you've got more color in your face, there's a vibrancy in the eyes, there's a lightness of mood. This is the outcome of the parasympathetic nervous system and its influence within the body. Now the problem is that many people are stuck in their sympathetic nervous system, which responds to stress, right? So that's this division. And this is normal for your body to switch on the sympathetic nervous system in response to daylight activity. There's something to do. We must get mobilized and moving. But if your system can't switch back to the parasympathetic nervous system, this side, when it's necessary, this is going to be a problem, isn't it? So many people, for example, I've had many clients that complain to me and say, I just can't sleep, like insomniac. And if you can't sleep, if you're waking up easily through the night, or you don't feel like you're getting a good sleep, it's probably an indication that you have a sympathetic dominant system. And this is because subconsciously you've learned to perceive the environment in a larger degree of stress. As a result, then you can see here in our little pictographic here that the sympathetic nervous system has connections to all of the organs as well, right? And so it's going to go ahead and make those changes. And one of them, significantly, is that it shuts down the digestive process. It causes the muscles throughout the digestive tract to contract and the nerves corresponding to that, so that, as we've touched on previously, the blood can be diverted into your muscles so that you can fight the stress, remember, or run away, the fight or flight. If you are chronically in this sympathetic overdrive, what's going to happen, of course, needless to say, if your digestive system is being shut down, how are you going to digest the food? The actual food that you're placing into your system is not going to be digested and effectively assimilated into your body. And so you're going into a catabolic state. Your body's breaking down its reservoirs, its energy stores, so that it can face the emergency. But we really can't be expected to live in an emergency, can we? In the modern lifestyle, because there's so much to do, this rat race keeps our legs moving, doesn't it? This is unfortunately the state that a lot of people find them chronically remaining within. So hereby our bodily resources are depleted and degeneration is accelerated. So fortunately, it is the case that these things can be resolved despite the physiological complexity of what I was just discussing. Calming your system is actually very, very simple. It's not complex, it's not even difficult. The greatest challenge is simply just finding the time to do it and prioritizing that which is required to make that happen. In the Rejuvenation portal, we have a few basic techniques that anyone can utilize to calm their system and promptly feel better. So once you're in the portal, what you'll find is there's a couple, the SET instructional and the Calm and Cultivate meditation. These are two simple ways that you can begin to apply this technique of calming your system. As a result, you'll be able to shift your body away from that sympathetic overdrive into the parasympathetic division, the calm and cultivate, the rest and digest, which will of course bring yourself into a regenerative state, and that is fundamental to rejuvenating the system, bringing it into a higher state of health, function and well-being. So further to that, with consistent application of these techniques, you can train your system to be actively calm always. So what do I mean by that? Well, for many people who are watching this video, you'll probably have had physical contact with me, for example, and you'll notice that consistently each day, I'm always calm. It doesn't matter what's happening. There could be very dire circumstances, emergencies and so forth occurring within my life, and yet I'm able to handle these effectively without becoming stressed and overwhelmed. Now, that's not a skill that I have cultivated in a few days, a few weeks, or a few months. It's a long-term result of my applying these techniques and thereby causing my system to remain chronically in the parasympathetic division. It's always calm. That's not to say that I'm lying about doing lazy things and other relaxing behaviors that we would commonly associated with that which is termed rest and recovery. Actually, it's the opposite. I'm probably more active than most people you'll know. And the reason being is because if you can train your system to remain calm, to remain in the parasympathetic division, then what you'll find is that you can cultivate your energy more effectively. If you have more energy, obviously you're going to be able to achieve a lot more, aren't you? And so I get an incredible amount done throughout the day. I'm very active, but I'm also very good at bringing myself back into that regenerative aspect of the nervous system so that I can cultivate my system, cultivate more energy, and regenerate more effectively. So next up, we've got one more section to go in this presentation series. I'm sure you've learned a few things so far. In the next section, we're going to discuss the electromagnetic influences. These are the subtle energies that are impacting upon our system and what you can do to benefit in that way. So once again, thanks again for watching. I'll look forward to being with you then.